Yeah, thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here and bring you on the journey of LUMA Vision, building the future of interventional imaging, at least for a few minutes. But if you're interested, I think there's much more time to talk. Now, since we call it LUMA Vision, I think what could be better than maybe starting with a quick, short overview of what we do as a short video for you.
When my co-founder and I met, and we spent time in cardiac surgery and observed many procedures where we saw every second patient comes back twice or 3 or 4 times before they treated successfully. And we looked into this and tried to understand what is the problem there. And we saw that really imaging and navigation, so understanding where you are and where you want to go in the heart is a main problem. And this is what we're addressing with LUMA Vision as a technology. When doctors perform these procedures, what they do is they insert small tubes, small catheters with a diameter of 2-3 millimeters in the groin, and then they advance these catheters up into the heart through the inferior vena cava, where they enter up in the right atrium. Then what they do is they cross over into the left side of the heart and perform ablation, so the scarring of tissue locally. And again, the problem there is that they don't have any visual line of sight on this, which means if we have an imaging system placed on the right side of the heart, imaging the left side while another catheter is positioned up here for treatment, then we can provide orientation, guidance, and then also assessment when the ablation has been done. Doctors are performing treatment more or less in a black box procedure, so they're flying blind. And we want to provide a product which gives a light in the heart, which gives them the view within the heart and gives them an understanding where they are, tells them where they need to go, and also if they've done the treatment successfully. We've built an end-to-end imaging system, which is very flexible. It's fully software-defined, so we can be adopting our platform to where the market goes and also where the needs from the clinical side are.
Why we needed to do these different settings for the processing, because what's looking good in a high resolution 2D image doesn't really look good in a 3D image. So basically the processing needed to be different. Then of course we have different timings, because if you just have a 2D view, there's much less data to be displayed than a 3D view, and this all needs to be snappy and fluent, which is also data rate wise a huge difference.
Why do we use Qt is a good question. It's certainly an industry standard for C++ GUI applications. There's a lot of examples where Qt is used in medical devices, which is important for us. As a startup, we want to avoid risk. But then there's many other benefits, like it's cross-platform. When we do build-in testing, we always have the potential to deploy on Windows or Linux, and that's also a huge benefit. We can also look at mobile downstreams. And in Qt, there's a very powerful foundation of features we can use. Qt 3D is one. Using OpenGL rendering right away is very comfortable for getting started pretty quickly. It's also then using QML as a language, which is not always straightforward, but it's also a very direct tool, which is very well understood in this regard.
So we partnered with KDAB. They helped us, especially with the GUI design aspect, so basically how to architect the GUI and enable us to actually provide the features we need to provide to our customers, the doctors, the EPs that actually work with the catheters.
Yeah, that's just a very quick overview, but maybe to take a step back initially and really bring you along the journey. LUMA Vision started in 2017. Now, eventually, a lot of the development, you see this also in the chart around the team size, started in 2020 when we closed the large Series A investment round. But again, maybe more relevant for this audience today, a lot of the software stack, a lot of the developments for the product really started in mid-2021. So for us, as LUMA Vision, this means about a 2.5 years time horizon to bring a medical software from beginning to market approval eventually. Now, you've seen this, again, I don't want to make it too complex, but eventually we're focusing really on complex treatments in the heart. When doctors want to perform complex surgery on closed hearts, so not open chest, but minimally invasively, they go up with catheters, and we are providing the site in these procedures. We developed this imaging system, and you saw that before also from our lab in Munich, and this imaging system is developed including hardware as well as full software stack and also the front-end control by the LUMA Vision team. Of course, we're partnering with people like KDAB and others, but importantly, this end-to-end development is quite important and unique for us to allow what we need to do for software-defined imaging, for data-driven imaging. We heard about generative AI and deep learning applications. All of this have a very strong place in the imaging field, and this is where we really enable this based on, let's say, owning the full platform. From a clinical application, and then we actually switch over quite quickly into talking more about how we use Qt and how our software stack is built and some of those lessons learned along our journey. It's really that we have developed an imaging catheter, you see here, which provides a unique field of view in the heart. And you see it's positioned here in the right atrium, so one of the 4 chambers, but we can capture almost the whole heart in one single position. And this enables them then to see, and this is data from a preclinical study we did recently, to not only use this for live 4D imaging, so single volumetric imaging, and we've seen other ultrasound data, for example, this morning, but really provide this anatomical context. So giving doctors an understanding, am I in the chest, am I lower in the belly, where is my catheter or where is my tool positioned, and using this anatomical context, in this example you see a right atrium, for example, to give a good understanding, as well as combine it then with guidance, so navigating tools, telling users where they are, or doctors specifically where they are, and then also telling them when they have reached their goals successfully, as you've seen before. And finally, we get a very rich, powerful understanding of the full anatomy. Again, you see this, some of the data we acquire with our system, but that is really the foundation for tailoring this to the clinical needs in the application space. Now, when we started this from scratch, so we heard this morning around, oh, is there legacy tools for GUI? We started really blank sheet of paper. Now, we started with a very small team, and I would say in our software team, while a company is 50 people of size, our software team, including, let's say, computer vision, is about 20 people, so still small. How do you define the architecture? How do you evolve it? And we've actually evolved into a modular monolith as an architecture, which allows us to be, on the one side, very performant, thinking about low latency, but also having an architecture which is maintainable, certain in terms of dependencies, as you see here on the right-hand side. We use a lot of libraries, so our goal is not to reinvent the wheel. We need to partner, we need to focus where is the core value we can generate as a startup, and I would urge everyone interested in that space, try to do the same. Focus on what makes you unique, and then work with the best partners you can find for anything else. For build test, I think pretty much I would hope industry or see industry standard, looking at performance, looking at how do you integrate, having good coding guidelines, but also making sure that every merge is actually reviewed before it's actually merged back again. I think that's pretty much industry standard, but it's important in order to really ensure code quality even before you go into testing. And again, we heard earlier about the importance of testing, specifically in the context of medical devices where you have high-risk applications, test coverage, but also how you do testing from unit tests all the way through regression, GUI testing, system integration tests is quite critical. This is a major focus. From a software management, and you see this also summarized here in the bottom, we use a lot of off-the-shelf software, but importantly, we also, of course, focusing on how we can integrate this. We're using Conan as a package management system, which has been quite powerful, not without its problems, but generally it's, I think, a very strong foundation for us. Now, when we think about going again a step back, why do we pick Qt in the first place? And you saw this also touched in the video before. There's really three main areas. On the one side, I would call Qt pretty much the de facto industry standard for medical software applications. There's other tools available, but if you want to have a sufficient track record of good software being developed, also being approved for the medical market, so that means for us getting CE mark approval in Europe or FDA approval in the United States, this is quite key to have a track record available, but also having a good developer base on the other side. And this is really available, I think, as we see probably quite well in the room today. On the second part, it's really performance. We use C++, we use CUDA, we use OpenGL for rendering, or then maybe eventually Vulkan, and Till will talk about this also later. It's quite key to have a very performant application, and I wouldn't say Qt is perfect in everything, but it's very flexible with how you integrate into your application. And then the third area is being cross-platform. So we heard about this before, deploying on Windows, deploying on Linux. Maybe deploy on a mobile platform eventually or on a tablet. Maybe we do an augmented reality application in future in the medical space. Having this capable with one front-end framework is extremely powerful. So these has been really the main reasons for us to start with Qt in the first place. Now, we've also had a lot of lessons learned along the way, and some of the maybe more detailed examples we dive into in the next few minutes is really on the one side how we enable processing with Qt, how we enable processing maybe partially without Qt, how we develop our graphical user interface, and you'll see an evolution of this in a minute, but also how we think about complex rendering activities, and I think there are some interesting examples also here this morning. There's also a last point here around licensing. We actually won't talk about this today. It's all solvable, but it requires upfront management and consideration. So if you're interested in that or you have questions, I think happy to talk about through today. Now, thinking about the first and foremost part for us, which was really key and essential from the start, it's all around processing. When we think about processing, it means low latency, high data rate. So when we think about, and you see this pipeline or this architecture on the top for processing, we have hardware interfaces, we do low-level synchronization, and then we do low-level processing with a high frame rate. And for us, this means maybe 8,000 frames per second, maybe 10,000 frames per second. That's the input data rate we're looking at. We then process this information, synchronize it, and then we have different pipelines. And pipelines may have very different runtimes. Again, some of them may be 8 kilohertz, others may be 20 seconds per one acquisition or one pipeline. And then from that, pushing this forward for visualization graphics, but also interaction control is quite key. And our architecture enables that. But we have also made a very conscious, strict separation of our core logic from dependencies on Qt in order to enable this and focus the core logic really on performance with processing and doing all of that. The handover in this, by the way, is fully GPU-based. So once we bring everything on a GPU memory, it never leaves. And that's quite important for maintaining then what you see on the bottom hand here is performance with bandwidth. So when we think about bandwidth, this is gigabytes per second, by the way. We get about 2.8 gigabytes per second, which we process in real time, no matter whether it's 8 kilohertz or lower data rates. And importantly, we can store all of this information. So going back to the point of software-defined imaging, storing all this information allows us to go to a study, acquire 2 terabytes of data in one day, come back, then 3 months later, we have another software release, and then we run the new processing pipelines on the same data. That's the flexibility you need to provide, I would say, in the 21st century. So our performance metrics, you see them summarized here. 2.8 gigabytes, 100 milliseconds, 160 milliseconds maximum, or worst case latency. But importantly, this is all improving, and based on being flexible for software, that gives us a lot of freedom to actually improve on that day to day through software-defined imaging. The second part then is, once we have data available, of course, how you bring this together in the user interface, and then the third part is the actual rendering part. But to dive in the second part on the user interfaces, you see here on the right-hand side an evolution of our user interface. It wasn't very pretty in the beginning. Probably you all see that. Version 0.1, the Gherkin, when we released the Gherkin back in time, it was an important milestone for the company, but it was not a user interface you would work with clinicians. Now, since then, we have evolved quite a bit. And importantly, some of the lessons learned I would recommend from our experience is really work with the right partners from the beginning, work with the right clinicians from the beginning. And it's not easy. We had made wrong choices before. It's just lessons learned. We had engaged in agencies which maybe didn't have the material expertise in our medical field, and we learned the hard lesson by paying more and getting less. So not good in the startup space. But then identifying the right partnerships is quite key because, let's face it, you can't do everything yourself and you shouldn't. Focus on what is important and solve that as best as you can. Now, the other part is how do you then do a handover? How do you integrate this in, as you've seen in the video, in QML language before? We tried different bridges, just transparently. We used Adobe XD, we used Figma, bridges available. Honestly, none of them worked for us, really. We tried, they worked for simple cases, but when you think about really complexity, customization is important. So my recommendation would be rather build on an atomic design, have a pixel-perfect prototype, maybe in Figma, build up your small units, entities, or atoms, build up your molecules from that, and then bring it together in the full application. Once you need to make changes, then it allows you to be very flexible. So we have a defined handover process now for our design team, which also is with an agency and partially internal, to the development side, which we do internal and also partially in collaboration with KDAB. The third part is really rendering, and we've seen this some in the video before, but here you see how it's looking at our actual production user interface today, the system as it's used in clinical practice. You see on the left-hand side here a 3D render, on the right-hand side there's 2 planes drawn from that same volume which is acquired. You also see the user interface and the interaction of 2D overlays with 3D volumetric rendering. And what I would definitely say from our experience with Qt 3D and OpenGL, it allows you to make extremely quick progress. If you want to get the ground running, hit the ground running quickly as a company, it's actually quite unique to base on that. On the other side, it also is very convenient. So a lot of the function is available. The technology has been around for I wouldn't say many, many years, but certainly it's around the block for a few years. And that really helps to remove some of the sharp edges we also heard earlier this morning, and it's really a well-used platform. And it has been quite unique for us to enable to be where we are right now, thanks to Qt3D and OpenGL. Now, it's not perfect, obviously. Nothing is perfect in life, and some of the pitfalls and shortcomings we're facing is, again, you can make very quick, decent progress very efficiently. Then if you want to make things perfect, it gets quite challenging sometimes. So there's some corner cases for us. We're centering around, for example, flexible 2D overlays in a 3D volume and how you interact with this. It becomes difficult, and it always requires, or most often requires, compromises to be made consciously. And then this is really what we have been working with. On the other side, and this is maybe the more important one for us in the long term, is we want to build the future of cardiac imaging. OpenGL has been around for many years. There's newer technologies. We heard Metal, Vulkan, Direct3D in the latest versions, which are closer to hardware. This is where we see the future, and this is also where we are embarking actually with KDAB on the specifics of developing custom rendering applications with Vulkan for LUMA Vision. And at that point, maybe I'll hand over for Till to give you more insights on this.
All right, thanks very much. Sorry about my voice. I hope you can decently hear me. I have a very ill-timed cold, so hopefully this is not too bad, but I'll do my best. So thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, as the authors of Qt3D, of course, that's the thing that we went to first when it came to developing this sort of interface quickly and iterate on it using OpenGL at the time, which was sort of the industry standard at the time. I have to explain a little bit about the system on a technical level. It has 3 GPUs total. 2 of those GPUs are doing GPGPU, so basically processing math on 2 of the GPUs, and so CUDA mostly, and then the third one is used for visualization. And in order to achieve the kind of data rates and bandwidth that we just saw, you really can't go through the CPU between those GPUs. You have to do direct transfers from between the GPUs. So basically, we need complete control over all of the resource handling. We need to share textures between the GPU, and we need to get that very, very efficiently on screen. And it was not possible, or at least not to the level that we needed, to do that with a fairly generic system like Qt3D, and in fact Qt, because we basically have to bypass as much as we humanly can to get the 3D content on screen with the sort of latency requirements that this product has. We're using a custom Vulkan memory allocator from GPU Open, for example. That's the level that we have to go to get this sort of performance. So possible, but certainly not trivial. So why did we end up going for a completely custom, from scratch Vulkan renderer? So we're no longer using Qt3D in this. Several aspects here. As I mentioned, the CUDA part of this is very heavy lifting with a lot of data in a very low latency environment. So we need complete control over this. Otherwise, we are stalling, so we can't afford any sort of latencies in that pipeline. So we need to be in complete control over all of the resources that are created, when they are created, how they are being used. We need to do the synchronization manually, and having a custom renderer for Vulkan is really the only thing that gives us that level of control. In terms of, philosophically, what is the smallest knife you can use to cut the thing you want to cut, right? So we know we need to target Windows and Linux. Mac is currently not on the cards, so we don't need to deal with that. So Vulkan sort of gives us the most powerful, lowest level thing that works well on both platforms. So we went for that. By the way, that was a collaborative decision and the result of a bunch of prototyping, so it's not like we just picked that. This was actually experimentation that led to this. To be fair, also with other 3D solutions, not just a custom one. But ultimately, we decided that we would need, and as Christoph mentioned, they need to and want to be in full control of the whole stack. So we decided to build a custom Vulkan renderer, which allows things like having a testing environment where you can tweak that algorithm in collaboration with the people who will use the system to achieve the sort of quality of interaction and quality of data understandability that they need in physical practice. So this allows very quick iteration because we can tweak literally every aspect of this algorithm ourselves. We do, of course, still need to integrate with Qt 2, so with QML effectively. As Christoph mentioned, one of the challenges initially was to get, for example, from a 2D label that sits on top of the screen to a 2D label that sits inside of the 3D scene. and to be able to transition between the two dynamically. So that's something that's possible with this. That was very hard to do with the previous solution. Yeah, and as I mentioned, we can really rapidly iterate thanks to this. It comes at a cost, of course, right? There's a lot of complexity. LUMA Vision will have to carry this forward themselves with our help or somebody else's help. So it's a bit of code to maintain, but it's a very critical piece of the technology. So we believe in this case it was the right choice to go for something custom. In terms of our involvement, I think one of the things that worked really well is that we had very small teams usually involved with this over the last 3 years or so. So from the early prototypes, basically quick QML sketches with the built-in OpenGL stuff to Q3D-based sketches and iterations of the UI together with the UX teams, all the way to this custom renderer, and that team has changed over the last 2.5 years. So there was always 2 or 3 people involved, but different people along the way, depending on the expertise that was needed. And I think that's something that we can uniquely bring to these kinds of projects. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. We have learned a ton in this project, and I think we've been able to build a product that is hopefully actually going to make a real impact in the world. Thanks to Q, and thank you very much.